My in-laws threw a heirs-only luncheon, barring me. You're not blood. I'd set up their retirement fund. I withdrew my contributions, triggering tax audits and a cascade of financial woes. I, 34 am, never imagined that 15 years of marriage would lead me here, sitting in a lawyer's office, methodically dismantling the financial empire I'd built for people who just told me I wasn't family. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Cream-colored cardstock, embossed lettering, the works. My wife brought it in from the mailbox with this weird expression on her face, something between embarrassment and defiance. She handed it to me without a word. I read it twice, certain I'd misunderstood. Family luncheon, blood heirs only, it said across the top in elegant script. Below that, a date, time, and location at her parents' estate. Then, in smaller print, this gathering is exclusively for direct descendants to discuss family legacy matters. I looked up at my wife. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I asked her what this was about, my voice probably sharper than I intended. She mumbled something about her parents wanting to discuss inheritance with just the biological family members. I pointed out that I'd been part of this family for 15 years. We had 2 kids together, for crying out loud. She just shrugged and said it was her parents' decision, not hers. That's when something cold settled in my chest. A bit of context. I'm a financial analyst by profession, specialized in tax optimization and estate planning. When I married into this family, my in-laws were comfortable but financially disorganized. My father-in-law had run a successful contracting business, but he'd never thought much about retirement. My mother-in-law came from old money that had been poorly managed for generations. About 8 years ago, during a family dinner, my father-in-law mentioned he was worried about retirement. He was 60 then, wanted to retire at 65, but had no real plan. I offered to help, not because I expected anything in return, but because that's what family does, right? I spent months restructuring their finances. I set up a complex but legal retirement fund, moving assets into tax-advantaged accounts, establishing trusts, creating a diversified investment portfolio. The key piece was a sophisticated donor-advised fund that I contributed to significantly. I'd had a really good few years at work, and my bonuses were substantial. Instead of keeping it all, I funneled a significant portion into their retirement structure. Here's the thing, though. I kept my name on everything I contributed. The accounts were joint. The trusts listed me as a primary contributor and beneficiary, and the donor-advised fund was technically under my control. I'd structured it this way for tax purposes, but also because, frankly, I'm not an idiot. I'd seen too many family situations go sideways in my line of work. My wife knew about the contributions, but never paid much attention to the details. Money bored her. Her parents definitely knew I'd helped, but I don't think they ever grasped the specifics of who owned what. Over the years, I'd contributed close to $400,000 of my own money into their retirement structure. Combined with their existing assets and the growth from my investment strategies, their retirement fund had ballooned to nearly $2 million. They'd retired comfortably 3 years ago, traveling, buying a vacation home, living the dream. And now they were having an heirs-only lunch. The luncheon was scheduled for Saturday. My wife went. I stayed home with our kids, aged 12 and 9. The whole morning felt surreal. I made pancakes, helped with homework, threw a ball around in the backyard, all while this numbness spread through me. She came back around 4 in the afternoon. I asked her how it went. She said it was fine, just boring estate planning stuff. I pressed for details. She got defensive, said I was being paranoid. Finally, she admitted that her parents had outlined how they were dividing their estate among their 3 children. My wife and her 2 brothers would each inherit roughly equal shares. I asked if my contributions were mentioned. She looked confused. I clarified, the $400,000 I'd put into their retirement fund. She went pale. She said she thought that was a gift. I told her it absolutely was not. It was a contribution to a structure where I maintained legal rights. She accused me of keeping score, said that's not how family works. I reminded her of the invitation I'd received, or rather, hadn't received. She didn't have an answer for that. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that phrase, "You're not blood." I'd heard it before, little comments here and there over the years. My mother-in-law once saying how important it was that the kids had strong family genes, while looking pointedly at my wife. My father-in-law joking that at least the grandkids were real family. I'd brushed it off as awkward humor, generational differences. But this was different. This was official. This was them sitting down with lawyers and accountants and formally declaring that I wasn't part of the family legacy. Monday morning, I called my lawyer. He's an old friend from college who specializes in asset protection and family law. I laid out the situation. He was quiet for a long moment, then asked me if I was sure about what I was considering. I told him I'd never been more sure of anything. The structure I'd created was elegant in its complexity, but the extraction was surprisingly simple. Because my name was on the primary accounts and I was listed as the controlling party on the donor-advised fund, I had the legal right to withdraw my contributions. It would trigger taxes, penalties, and a whole cascade of financial consequences, but it was legal. My lawyer warned me this would nuke my relationship with my in-laws, possibly my marriage. I told him the relationship was apparently already dead. I just hadn't been invited to the funeral. We spent the week preparing documents. I pulled financial records, contribution receipts, trust documents, everything. The paper trail was immaculate because I'd been the one who created it. The following Monday, I executed the withdrawal. $400,000, plus a portion of the growth that was legally attributable to my contributions, moved out of their retirement structure and into a separate account under my sole control. The immediate effect was dramatic. Their retirement fund dropped from nearly $2 million to just under $1 million. But that was just the beginning. The donor-advised fund I'd established had been structured to provide them with specific tax advantages. When I withdrew my portion, it invalidated some of those advantages retroactively. The IRS doesn't like it when the structure of tax-advantaged accounts changes suddenly. It triggers audits. Within 2 weeks, my in-laws received notification of a tax audit going back 3 years. The penalties for improperly structured accounts would be substantial. But it got worse. The vacation home they'd purchased 2 years ago had been bought using a loan that was secured against the retirement fund. With the fund's value suddenly cut in half, they were over-leveraged. The bank sent a notice demanding additional collateral or immediate partial repayment. My father-in-law called me. He was screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. He accused me of theft, sabotage, betrayal. I let him wind down, then calmly explained that I'd simply withdrawn my own contributions, which I had every legal right to do. He sputtered that it was family money. I reminded him about the heirs-only luncheon. He went silent. My mother-in-law tried a different approach. She called my wife in tears, saying I was destroying them, that they'd done so much for me over the years. My wife came to me, crying, begging me to fix this. I asked her what exactly they'd done for me. She couldn't articulate anything specific. I pointed out that I'd paid for our entire wedding because her parents said they couldn't afford it. I'd loaned her brother $20,000 that was never repaid. I'd spent countless hours managing their finances, for free. She said that's what family does. I agreed, and asked why I wasn't included in the family luncheon. She didn't have an answer. My brother-in-law, the middle child, showed up at my office. He was more composed than his father, but no less angry. He said I was being petty and vindictive. I asked him if he'd objected to my exclusion from the luncheon. He admitted he hadn't even thought about it. I told him that was the problem. The tax audit expanded. The IRS started looking into other aspects of my in-laws' finances, and they didn't like what they found. Turns out, my father-in-law had been playing fast and loose with some of his business deductions over the years. When I was managing their finances, I'd cleaned most of that up, but there were historical issues. The penalties started mounting. They hired a lawyer to explore whether they could sue me. My lawyer sent them a polite letter explaining that not only did I have the legal right to withdraw my contributions, but if they pursued litigation, I'd countersue for the $20,000 I'd loaned to my brother-in-law, plus interest. I'd also be forced to disclose to the IRS some questionable financial maneuvers they'd made before I'd cleaned up their accounts. Their lawyer apparently advised them to drop it. My wife was caught in the middle, and I genuinely felt bad about that. But she'd made her choice at that luncheon. She'd sat there while her parents explained how the family money would be divided, and she hadn't said a word about my contributions. She'd chosen their side. One night, about 6 weeks after I'd withdrawn the funds, she asked me what I wanted. Did I want a divorce? Did I want her parents to apologize? What would make this right? I told her I wanted to be treated like family. Not a resource, not a tool, not someone useful to have around when there's work to be done, but actual family. She said I was being unreasonable, that I destroyed her parents' retirement over hurt feelings. I corrected her. I'd simply taken back what was mine after being explicitly told I wasn't part of the family. If my contributions were so critical to their retirement, maybe they should have considered that before the heirs-only luncheon. Update 1. It's been 3 months since my original post. The situation has evolved in ways I didn't anticipate. The tax audit concluded. The penalties and back taxes amounted to nearly $150,000. My in-laws had to sell the vacation home at a loss because they couldn't maintain the mortgage payments and cover the IRS debt. My mother-in-law stopped speaking to me entirely. My father-in-law communicates only through terse emails about the grandkids. My wife and I separated 6 weeks ago. She moved into her parents' house, taking the kids with her. I have them on weekends. The divorce is amicable, if that's even possible. We're splitting assets down the middle, no arguments. She seems almost relieved, like a weight's been lifted. My kids asked why I wasn't coming to family dinners anymore. I told them sometimes adults have disagreements that take time to work through. My daughter, the 12-year-old, looked at me and said she heard Grandma saying I stole from them. I explained, as simply as I could, that I'd given Grandma and Grandpa money to help them, and when they said I wasn't really family, I took my money back. She thought about this for a moment, then asked if that meant she wasn't really family either, since she was half me. That question gutted me. The financial cascade continued. My brother-in-law's business ran into trouble, and he'd been counting on an early inheritance to shore it up. That wasn't happening now. He had to lay off employees and take out a high-interest loan. He blamed me publicly on social media, though he didn't use my name. Just posted vague things about family betrayal and people showing their true colors. My other brother-in-law, the youngest, actually reached out to apologize. He said he'd never agreed with the heirs-only luncheon but didn't speak up because he didn't want to cause drama. He understood why I did what I did, even if he wished I'd found another way. It was something, I guess. The most unexpected development came from my soon-to-be ex-wife's aunt, her mother's sister. She called me out of the blue and asked to meet for coffee. I almost declined, but curiosity got the better of me. She told me she'd heard about everything and wanted to give me some context. Apparently, my mother-in-law had always resented that her daughter married someone who wasn't from their social circle. I was from a middle-class background, worked my way through college, built my career from nothing. My mother-in-law had hoped her daughter would marry someone from one of the old-money families they socialized with. The aunt said the heirs-only luncheon wasn't really about estate planning. It was my mother-in-law's way of finally drawing a line, of making it clear that I'd never really be one of them, no matter how much I contributed or how long I stayed married to her daughter. I asked why she was telling me this. She said because it was cruel and wrong, and she'd stayed silent about her sister's behavior for too long. She apologized on behalf of the family, though she acknowledged it probably meant nothing coming from her. It meant more than she knew. Update 2. 6 months out now. The divorce is nearly finalized. I bought a smaller house closer to the kids' school. My ex-wife is still living with her parents, which I'm told is causing its own tensions. Apparently, having your adult daughter and grandchildren move back in when you're trying to stretch a reduced retirement fund is stressful. My kids are adjusting. We do video calls every night, and my weekends with them have become sacred. No phones, no distractions, just us. My daughter asked me last month if I was happier now. I told her the truth. Parts of my life were harder, but I wasn't pretending anymore, and that felt better. The financial situation for my in-laws stabilized somewhat. They're living on their remaining retirement fund, Social Security, and some part-time consulting work my father-in-law picked up. They're comfortable, but not living the lifestyle they'd planned. The trips abroad are gone. The country club membership was dropped. They're basically where they would have been if I'd never helped them at all. My brother-in-law's business went under. He's working for someone else now, blaming me in every conversation, from what I hear. The youngest brother-in-law and I occasionally grab beers. He's divorcing too, unrelated to all this drama, and we bond over navigating single parenthood. The most surprising call came from my father-in-law last month. He asked if we could talk. I agreed to meet at a neutral location, a park bench overlooking the river. He looked older than I remembered, tired. He started by saying he wouldn't apologize because he didn't think I'd accept it anyway. I appreciated the honesty. He said he'd been doing a lot of thinking and realized he'd taken me for granted. He'd seen me as an extension of his daughter, not as my own person with my own value. The heirs-only luncheon had been his wife's idea, but he'd gone along with it because it was easier than arguing. He said he understood why I'd withdrawn my contributions, even though it had wrecked their plans. He asked if there was any way forward, not to reconcile the money, but to have some kind of relationship for the grandkids' sake. I told him I'd think about it. I'm still thinking about it. The money I withdrew is sitting in investment accounts, growing. I've thought about what to do with it. Part of me wants to put it in trust for my kids, make sure they're taken care of. Part of me wants to donate it, make something good come from all this ugliness. Mostly, though, I think about that phrase, "You're not blood." I've realized that family isn't about blood. It's about showing up, about sacrifice, about treating people with dignity and respect. I tried to be family to these people for 15 years, and when it mattered, they made it clear I never was and never would be. I don't regret what I did. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my kids are growing up watching their family splinter. I regret the bitterness and anger that's poisoned so many relationships. But I don't regret standing up for myself. For the first time in my marriage, I enforced a boundary. I said this is who I am and this is what I'm worth. And if you can't respect that, then we can't continue as we have been. It cost me my marriage, my extended family, and a lot of sleepless nights. But I got something back too, my self-respect. And that's not nothing. The funny thing is, I would have given them the money anyway. If they'd just treated me like family, if they'd included me in that luncheon, or even acknowledged my contributions, I would have happily let my $400,000 stay in their retirement fund. I would have helped them through the tax issues. I would have been there. But they couldn't do that one simple thing. They couldn't see past blood to recognize the family member who'd been standing right in front of them all along. So here I am, in my smaller house, with my weekend custody arrangement and my investment accounts, and my self-respect intact. My kids tell me they love me every night on our video calls. I'm building a life that's mine, not an extension of someone else's family legacy. And you know what? I'm okay. More than okay. I'm free. The heirs got their inheritance, reduced as it is. And I got something more valuable, the knowledge that I don't need their validation to know my own worth. That's a lesson that's worth $400,000 any day. If you'd like to see more stories like this, a gentle tap on the subscribe button would mean the world to us.